My best friend stood in my living room clutching a blurry ultrasound and told me she was pregnant with my boyfriend's baby. She sobbed. She said it was an accident. She told me I had to step aside for the sake of the child. I believed her. But 2 weeks later, the women's health clinic called me, not her. They apologized for the mix-up with my appointment. The problem was I hadn't booked one. The name on file wasn't hers, it was mine, and there was no pregnancy. I'm Sarah, 27. My best friend Michelle didn't just lie about carrying my boyfriend's baby. She used my name, my insurance, my own identity to stage it. I only found out because a clinic accidentally called me to confirm an appointment I never made. That 5-minute phone call didn't just expose a fake pregnancy. It exposed a cold, deliberate plan to make me disappear. Michelle and I had been inseparable since freshman year of college. She was the friend who helped me move out of my toxic ex's apartment at 2 in the morning, who knew my coffee order before I did, and who I'd listed as my emergency contact on everything from my lease to my gym membership. She wasn't just my best friend, she was practically family. I trusted her with my keys, my secrets, and my boyfriend Eric. That was my first mistake. Eric and I had been together for 3 years. He was the kind of steady, kind person who remembered my mom's birthday and never missed a date night. We'd been talking about moving in together, maybe getting engaged. Life felt like it was finally clicking into place. Michelle, meanwhile, had been going through a rough patch, a string of bad relationships, a job she hated, a creeping jealousy about how easy my life seemed. She'd say things like, "Some people get all the luck," while staring at Eric a little too long. I told myself it was just her way of coping, told myself she'd never do anything to hurt me. I was wrong. The first strange thing happened 3 months ago. Michelle started being unusually interested in my health insurance. She asked what provider I had, if my plan covered specialist visits, what my copay was. I figured she was just stressed about her own coverage after losing her job, so I answered without thinking. Around the same time, she mentioned she'd been feeling sick, nauseous, tired, the kind of vague symptoms that could mean anything. I brought her soup. I held her hair back in the bathroom. I was being a good friend. And the whole time she was collecting information like ammunition. Then came the night everything changed. Eric was working late and Michelle showed up at my apartment unannounced, shaking like a leaf. Her eyes were red and puffy and she was clutching a crumpled piece of paper. She collapsed onto my couch and between sobs told me she was pregnant, with Eric's baby. She said it had happened one night when I was out of town, that she and Eric had both been drinking, that they'd made a terrible mistake. She even showed me the ultrasound, a blurry black and white image with a date and her name printed across the top. My heart stopped. I couldn't breathe. I asked Eric and he denied it frantically, but Michelle's story was so detailed, so convincing. She told me she was terrified, that she needed me to understand, that maybe it was best if I just stepped aside for the baby. She made me feel like the villain for being upset, like I was the one who'd done something wrong, and I believed her. I started pulling away from Eric, from my own life, from my own sanity. The woman I thought would never hurt me had just detonated a bomb in the center of my world, and I was too stunned to realize the blast was designed to leave only one person standing, her. For the next 2 weeks, I lived in a fog thick enough to drown in. Every time my phone buzzed, I flinched. Michelle's texts were a relentless mix of weepy apologies and passive demands. "I'm so sorry you're hurting, but the baby needs a stable family. Eric and I need to figure this out. Can you just give us space?" She made it sound like I was the obstacle to a happy ending. And Eric, he kept calling, kept swearing nothing happened, but I couldn't look at him without seeing her tears and that blurry ultrasound. I stopped answering both of them. I stopped leaving my apartment. I called in sick to work 4 days in a row. It felt like the floor had dropped out from under everything I trusted. Then Michelle showed up at my door with a small velvet bag. Inside was a positive pregnancy test, still sealed in a Ziploc like it was evidence at a crime scene. "I took this morning," she whispered, "just in case you needed more proof." She also handed me a printout of lab results with her name and a hormone level circled in red. I stared at the numbers as if I could decode a lie hidden in black ink. I couldn't. She hugged me and said she'd never meant to hurt me, that sometimes love just happens. I felt myself hollowing out, a shell of the person I'd been 3 weeks earlier. While I withered, Michelle bloomed. She started posting on social media about her unexpected blessing. She bought maternity clothes. She tagged Eric in dreamy sunset selfies. My friends messaged me, confused. Was I okay? Was Eric really a cheater? I didn't know how to answer, so I said nothing. The silence only fed the story. Before long, I was the bitter ex who couldn't accept a beautiful miracle. The isolation was surgical. Michelle had maneuvered herself into the center while pushing me to the fringe of my own life, and it would have worked completely and permanently if not for a single phone call on a Tuesday afternoon. My phone rang with a number I didn't recognize, a local area code. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something made me pick up. A calm, professional voice said, "Hi, this is Northside Women's Health calling for Sarah. We just need to confirm your appointment tomorrow at 10 a.m. for a follow-up ultrasound. We also need to verify your insurance information. Something isn't matching on our end and we don't want you to get billed incorrectly." I nearly dropped the phone. I hadn't booked any ultrasound. I wasn't pregnant. I told the receptionist there must be a mistake. She hesitated, then said, "Well, the appointment is definitely under your name, date of birth, and insurance ID. The referring physician is Dr. Halstead. There's a note here that a friend would be driving you." A Michelle. My blood went cold. I asked her to read back the insurance details. She recited my member ID, my group number, even my employer's name. Every digit matched. Then she added, almost apologetically, "We actually called because when our sonographer pulled up your file, there's no pregnancy on record. There's no prenatal history, no positive test results logged. The only image we have is a generic print from our sample folder that was never supposed to be released. We're so sorry for any confusion. We think someone may have accessed your account fraudulently." The word fraudulently echoed in my skull. I managed to schedule an in-person meeting with their office manager for the next morning. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on my bathroom floor replaying every single interaction I'd had with Michelle over the past 3 months. The odd questions about my insurance, the way she'd lingered in my hallway when I'd left my purse on the hook, the ultrasound she'd waved in my face, blurry, convenient, undated. It was a smudged copy of a stock image, something you could download from a medical website in 5 seconds. At the clinic the next day, I brought my insurance card and my driver's license. The office manager, a woman with tired eyes and a voice full of genuine concern, pulled up the records. The only recent activity under my name was that single appointment, booked online 3 weeks earlier from an IP address that traced back to a coffee shop on Michelle's block. The appointment notes asked for a confirmation of pregnancy and a second ultrasound, but there was no pregnancy, no blood test, no urine test, no medical reason for the visit. It was a ghost appointment designed to look real from the outside. The clinic's security officer told me they'd flagged it when the sonographer realized the image in the file was one of their sample ultrasounds, watermarked and all. Someone had accidentally scanned it into my chart while trying to fabricate a record. Probably Michelle, fawning in a favor or sweet-talking a clerk. She'd used my identity to book the appointment, probably hoping she could arrive, pretend to be me, and walk out with a fresh, believable ultrasound photo in hand. But she'd messed up the details and the clinic caught the discrepancy. That was the moment the fog lifted. The grief, the guilt, the self-blame, it all flipped into something else. Rage, yes, but also a kind of fierce clarity. Michelle had not made a drunken mistake with Eric. She had run a months-long psychological operation. She'd photoshopped the first ultrasound, faked the pregnancy test, manufactured the lab result, stolen my insurance information, and systematically isolated me from my own boyfriend and friends. The woman who'd held my hair back in college now wanted to erase me. I sat in my car in the clinic parking lot, gripping a printout of the fraud report, and finally understood the full shape of the bomb she detonated. The blast wasn't just for me. She intended to walk away with my entire life and leave me as the collateral damage nobody believed. I wasn't going to let that happen, not anymore. I started my car and pointed it toward the only destination that made sense, the truth served directly to Michelle's face. I didn't go straight to Michelle. Not yet. I drove to Eric's apartment first, the fraud report riding shotgun. He opened the door looking like he hadn't slept in a month. Before he could say a word, I handed him the clinic documents and said, "She was never pregnant, it was all fake. She stole my insurance, booked an appointment under my name, and used a sample ultrasound from the internet." He read the pages 3 times, his hands trembling. Then he broke down. Not guilt, relief. He'd been living in a nightmare he didn't create, and I'd finally handed him the key. We sat on his floor for an hour, piecing everything together. Michelle had told him I knew about their encounter and had given my blessing. She'd fabricated a timeline so airtight that even he started doubting his own memory. She'd isolated both of us, playing each against the other while she filled the gap she'd carved out herself. We decided to confront her together, but not in private. Not another tearful performance where I'd end up apologizing for being hurt. We needed witnesses. We needed the people she'd already turned against me, our mutual friends, the ones who'd been getting her side of the story for weeks. I sent a group message. "Emergency meeting at my place. This isn't drama, it's the truth. If you ever cared about me, be there at 7. Then I called the clinic and asked if they could email me a formal statement confirming the fraudulent appointment and the sample ultrasound. The office manager said she'd have her supervisor draft something immediately. She also added quietly, "You should know we're required to report insurance fraud of this nature. It's likely your friend could face charges." I thanked her and hung up and let that information harden into resolve. By 7 o'clock, 7 friends were crammed into my living room, confused and on edge. Eric stood beside me. I laid out the evidence. The ultrasound image with the clinic's watermark, the appointment confirmation in my name, the insurance verification. The lab result Michelle had given me that the clinic confirmed was never generated. I played the voicemail from the clinic on speaker. The room went silent. One of my friends, Jenna, covered her mouth and whispered, "She told me you'd gone crazy. She said you were threatening her and the baby." Michelle had been feeding everyone the same script, twisting concern for the pregnant friend into isolation of the one telling the truth. I asked them to trust me now, to see what was in front of them. One by one, they nodded. The shift was tectonic. The story she'd built was cracking open. While we were still processing, my phone lit up with a call from the clinic's security officer. She asked if I had a moment. I put her on speaker. She explained that their IT department had traced the original online appointment booking to Michelle's personal laptop, using her home Wi-Fi. The booking was made 3 days before the big reveal in my apartment. She'd also attempted to access my medical records through the patient portal, using my birthday and a password that she'd probably lifted from a post-it note in my kitchen. The officer said a formal complaint had been filed with their fraud unit, and they'd be contacting law enforcement within 24 hours. I looked around the room. The expression on every face had moved from shock to disgust. The friend group was no longer divided. It was united against a single threat. But it got worse. While we were still reeling from the call, Jenna nervously pulled out her phone. She said Michelle had been bragging to her weeks earlier about how easy it was to fake medical documents online. She'd even shown Jenna a website called Fake Baby, where you could generate custom ultrasound images and positive pregnancy test products. Jenna had assumed it was morbid curiosity. Now she realized it was rehearsal. Then another friend, Mark, chimed in. He remembered Michelle asking him, months ago, if he knew a good lawyer who handled family disputes, because she had a friend in a tricky situation. She'd been laying the groundwork for a legal paternity claim against Eric before she even fabricated the pregnancy. That was the pivot. It wasn't just a desperate lie. It was a meticulously planned, multi-phase attack designed to erase me from my own life and install herself in my place. The insurance angle wasn't a slip-up. It was essential infrastructure. By booking under my name, she could generate a realistic paper trail. If Eric dared to ask for paternity proof, she'd point to my insurance records and say she'd been using my doctor as a trusted friend. It was a blackmail mechanism, a legal trap, and a psychological weapon all at once. The only reason it failed was because a sonographer noticed a watermark. a single watermark. Michelle had missed it, and that tiny crack was enough to bring her entire house of cards down. Now everyone in that room knew what I knew. And come tomorrow morning, we were going to make sure she knew it too. The confrontation wasn't just coming. It was already set in motion, and this time I wasn't walking in alone. We didn't wait. The next morning, 8 of us pulled up to Michelle's apartment. Eric had called ahead, telling her we needed to talk about the baby. She opened the door in a flowing maternity dress, her face already arranged into an expression of weary victimhood. Then she saw the group behind me and the expression flickered, just for a second. I handed her the clinic's fraud report. I watched her eyes scan the page, the color draining from her cheeks like water swirling down a drain. "This is a mistake," she started. "Someone must have hacked my account." I pulled out my phone and played the clinic's voicemail on speaker. Her own voice, recorded during an earlier intake call, confirmed she'd posed as me. She'd used my birthday, my address, and answered the security question about my mother's maiden name. She had no rebuttal for her own recorded voice. The performance collapsed. Her shoulders sagged, the maternity dress suddenly looking like a costume on an empty stage. She tried tears first, then rage. She screamed at me for ambushing her, for humiliating her in front of everyone. She blamed Eric for not loving her enough. She blamed me for having a life she wanted. Not once did she apologize. One of our friends, Mark, quietly said, "You need to get help, Michelle." She lunged at him and had to be physically restrained by Jenna. The confrontation lasted less than 15 minutes, but it hollowed out years of friendship in real time. I walked out of that apartment, leaving behind the woman I'd once called my best friend. She was a stranger, and I'd finally stopped chasing her shadow. The fallout was immediate and merciless. Within 48 hours, the entire friend group had cut ties. Michelle's social media went dark after Jenna posted a detailed timeline of the deception, complete with screenshots of the fraudulent documents. The clinic's fraud unit filed a formal report with the state insurance board. 2 weeks later, Michelle received a letter notifying her of an investigation for identity theft and attempted insurance fraud, a potential felony. She tried to email me, first to curse me out, then to bargain, then to offer a hollow apology. I didn't respond. Some bridges aren't meant to be rebuilt, they're meant to be sealed off for safety. Eric and I took months to heal. The damage wasn't just circumstantial, it was psychological. He'd been gaslit into questioning his own reality. I'd been manipulated into believing that my boyfriend and my best friend had betrayed me in the worst possible way. We went to couples counseling, not because our relationship was broken, but because we'd both been weaponized against each other and needed to rebuild trust from the ground up. Slowly, carefully, we did. He proposed 8 months later, not in a grand gesture but in our living room with takeout and a simple ring. I said yes. Not because the story had a fairy tale ending, but because we'd survived something that should have destroyed us, and that survival was the most honest foundation we'd ever had. But there was one final detail I didn't discover until a year later, and it still makes my skin crawl. While cleaning out an old shared cloud storage folder, I found a hidden subfolder Michelle had created under my account. Inside were dozens of saved images, stock photos of engagement rings, screenshots of Eric's social media, and a folder labeled S. I opened it. It contained a complete dated plan to isolate me from my friends, fabricate the pregnancy, and force Eric into a shotgun wedding by threatening a custody battle. The first entry was dated 6 months before the fake ultrasound. 6 months. This wasn't a moment of desperate madness. It was a premeditated campaign of psychological warfare. The clinic's call didn't just expose a lie. It disarmed a bomb that had been quietly ticking since the day I introduced my boyfriend to my best friend. And the only thing that saved me was a sonographer who noticed a watermark that wasn't supposed to be there. Michelle didn't just lie. She studied me. She mapped my vulnerabilities, my routines, my passwords, and weaponized everything she knew. The most dangerous betrayals don't come from strangers. They come from people who have eaten at your table, who know where you keep your spare key, who can answer your security questions because they were there when your mom got remarried. Trust isn't just a feeling. It's infrastructure, and when someone you love turns it against you, the collapse is total. I got lucky. A single watermark, a single clerical catch, was enough to stop a machine that had been running for months. Most people don't get that call. Most people live inside a lie they never learn to question. If there's one thing I want you to take from this, it's not paranoia. It's discernment. Pay attention to the friend who asks a little too much about your resources. Pay attention when someone roots themselves too quickly into your life. Not everyone who brings you soup is on your side. I'm grateful for Eric, for my friends who stood by me, and for a stranger in a clinic who noticed something out of place. Without her, I might still be apologizing for a crime I didn't commit. If you haven't already, please subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a story. Because the truth is stranger and sometimes far more calculated than fiction. Take care of yourselves and protect your data like you'd protect your front door. Someone might already be testing the lock.